The night was cold and unyielding, with a sliver of moonlight barely cutting through the dense urban fog. In a cramped, dimly lit apartment in a rundown neighborhood of a sprawling city, I stood frozen before a mirror cracked by years of neglect. It wasn't just any mirror. It was a relic of a past I wished to leave behind. A past in which betrayal and abandonment had shaped my every waking moment. Tonight, every reflective shard of that old mirror reminded me of the day that shattered my world. I still remember the exact moment, the shrill ring of my phone cutting through the silence of an ordinary evening. I answered with a mix of hope and dread, not knowing that the words I would hear next would change everything. "Your husband has just sent a text," the message read, delivered in an emotionless tone that made my heart clench. I listened as the voice on the other end detailed, without a trace of remorse, that he had not only divorced me by text, but had also drained our joint bank account, the account we had painstakingly built together over years of shared dreams and sacrifices. The cold, clinical tone of that message was a knife in the dark, but instead of crumbling, something inside me ignited. A fierce determination to transform that betrayal into something formidable. In that instant, the pain I felt crystallized into a burning desire for retribution. I vowed that I would not be a victim. I would harness every ounce of my shattered pride, every bitter tear, and every sleepless night to build a future that would leave him stunned and broken. I sat at my old, scarred desk, a single lamp illuminating the worn-out notebook in front of me. With trembling fingers, I began scribbling down ideas, a roadmap to a new life where I would reclaim my dignity and ensure that his careless actions would come back to haunt him. This was not a moment for tears. It was a moment for a revolution. And as the pages filled with frantic, determined writing, I made a silent promise. I would transform this heartbreak into the fuel that propelled me toward an empire of my own making. It was a rainy Tuesday evening when the fateful text arrived. Rain hammered relentlessly against the window of the cramped living room, where I huddled on an old, threadbare sofa. The rhythmic tapping of raindrops was the only sound breaking the oppressive silence of my once safe haven. In that moment, I was alone with the truth of my new reality. A reality where love had been traded for cruelty, and trust had been replaced by deception. I still recall the precise details, the time on the clock, the exact wording of his final message. The text was blunt and devoid of any false sympathy. It read, "I'm done. I've emptied our account. Don't bother calling. Enjoy your life alone." No punctuation, no apology, just cold, unadorned finality. For a moment, the world stopped. The rain seemed to intensify, as if mourning the loss of what had once been a shared future. I clutched my phone like a lifeline, the vibrations echoing in the hollow space of my heart. Every fiber of my being screamed in disbelief, yet a steely resolve began to take shape. In that dark, rain-soaked hour, memories of happier times intermingled with the sting of betrayal. I remembered the laughter we had shared during lazy Sunday mornings, the dreams whispered in the quiet moments before sleep. Those memories, now tainted with deceit, fueled my determination to never be rendered powerless again. I realized that I had two choices: sink into despair, or rise like a phoenix from the ashes of our broken marriage. And so, with a resolute heart and eyes fixed on the future I would build, I made my decision. I would not allow him to define my worth. I would channel the fury, the pain, and the disappointment into something grand, a meticulously orchestrated plan for revenge that would leave him utterly speechless. I would build an empire, brick by brick, until his memory was nothing more than a cautionary tale of hubris and regret. The days that followed were a whirlwind of emotions and restless planning. Every moment that I was not consumed by the crushing sorrow of betrayal was dedicated to plotting my comeback. I transformed my apartment into a war room, walls plastered, with handwritten notes, photographs, and diagrams that traced every step of the plan I was about to execute. I began by meticulously reviewing every detail of our shared finances. I pored over bank statements, credit card bills, and old receipts. Every transaction, every suspicious movement of money became a potential clue in a puzzle that I intended to solve. I recalled the times when he'd casually mentioned new investments or secret bank transfers, dismissing them as trivial details. Now, those details took on a sinister significance. I realized that the very system he had exploited to drain our account could be used against him. Every night, after the world had quieted down, I sat in the silence of my living room and drafted a list of contacts, a network of financial advisors, private investigators, and legal experts whom I could secretly consult. I reached out to them under the guise of needing help with a complex financial dispute. Every conversation was recorded in my notebook, every detail noted with precision. I wasn't just planning a simple act of revenge, I was laying the groundwork for a long-term strategy that would dismantle everything he had built. At the same time, I began to reinvent myself. I enrolled in advanced courses on business management and digital marketing, determined to learn every trick in the book. I devoured books and articles on entrepreneurship, finance, and the art of negotiation. In coffee shops and late-night study sessions, I scribbled ideas on napkins and posted motivational quotes on the peeling walls of my apartment. Each piece of knowledge was another tool in my arsenal, another weapon to be used in the war I was preparing. I even started a secret blog under a pseudonym, where I chronicled my journey of heartbreak and rebirth. The blog was raw, unfiltered, and brutally honest. It wasn't just about the pain I endured. It was about the transformation I was undergoing. I wrote about the nights filled with tears, the bitter taste of betrayal, and the fierce resolve that replaced despair. Slowly, my anonymous posts began to attract attention. Comments poured in from strangers who resonated with my story, offering support, advice, and even cautionary tales of their own. That digital community, hidden behind screens and pseudonyms, became my silent battalion, fueling my determination and reassuring me that I was not alone in my struggle. With my plan taking shape, I began to execute the first moves. I reached out to the financial experts on my list, setting up discreet consultations to review every aspect of our joint finances. In hushed tones over secure phone lines, I shared my suspicions and the evidence I had gathered. I learned that my husband had been siphoning money into offshore accounts and making secretive investments that were as opaque as they were risky. Every revelation added another layer to the intricate web of deceit I was about to unravel. I also revisited our shared life, every memory, every photograph, and began compiling a digital archive. This archive wasn't just a collection of our happier times. It was a curated exhibit of our shared history, one that I could later use to expose the stark contrast between the promises we once made and the cold reality of his betrayal. I scanned old letters, saved text messages, and even recorded voice memos of the times we had shared dreams of a future together. Each piece of this archive was a silent testament to what I had lost and what I was determined to reclaim. At work, I maintained an outward calm. My colleagues noticed a change in me, a new intensity, a focus that bordered on obsession. They remarked on how I had transformed the little apartment, once a haven of quiet resignation, into a war room of strategic brilliance, even as whispers circulated about the collapse of my marriage. I wore my pain like a badge of honor. I wasn't just a broken woman. I was a phoenix rising from the ashes, and every day was a step toward a future that would be defined not by my losses, but by my triumphant return. One evening, as I was meticulously reconciling the accounts on my aging laptop, my phone buzzed with an unexpected message. It was from an old friend, someone who had once shared in my dreams and celebrated my every small victory. I heard about what happened. The message read, "If you need anything, I'm here." I almost responded with gratitude, but then I paused. I realized that every offer of help was a double-edged sword. While it might offer temporary solace, it could also tether me to a past I was determined to outgrow. I saved the message without replying, storing it alongside countless other fragments of my old life, a reminder of the network I once had, and the new network I was building in secret. Over the next few weeks, every day became a battle against time and doubt. In the quiet hours before dawn, when the city was shrouded in silence and the chaos of daylight had yet to begin, I would sit at my desk in the dim glow of my old lamp, poring over pages of financial records and transaction logs. The soft hum of the refrigerator in the background merged with the occasional drip of a leaky faucet, setting the rhythm for my nocturnal investigations. I recalled the many nights of restless determination, when I would reread every email, every bank statement, searching for discrepancies that might betray my husband's secret misdeeds. I noticed irregular transfers, sums that were funneled into accounts with exotic names and offshore addresses. It became clear that he was not merely emptying our joint account. He was siphoning off money for ventures and luxuries unknown to me. Each discovery ignited a spark of righteous fury within me and reinforced my resolve to bring him down. It was during one of these late-night sessions that I decided I could not do this alone. I needed allies, people who could help me transform the raw evidence I was gathering into an unassailable case. I discreetly reached out to a trusted financial analyst I had met years earlier at a seminar. His name was Michael, a meticulous, sharp-witted man with an innate ability to decipher even the most convoluted financial puzzles. Over a series of confidential meetings held in a quiet, nondescript cafe, I shared my suspicions, along with copies of my painstakingly collated data. Michael's eyes narrowed as he reviewed the documents. "These transfers, they're not typical expenses," he murmured, finger tracing along a particularly large sum that had been moved several times within a short span. "Your husband is clearly trying to cover something up. We need to follow the money trail, and I can help with that." His words, spoken in a low and determined tone, solidified the alliance. I knew then that I was no longer isolated in my quest. I had found someone who not only understood the intricacies of the financial world, but also shared my burning desire for justice. Simultaneously, I reached out to a former colleague from my previous job, Laura. She had a reputation for being resourceful and fiercely loyal, and she possessed a network of contacts in the legal and investigative sectors. In hushed tones over secure phone calls, we discussed strategies to legally probe my husband's financial misadventures. "We must be cautious," Laura warned, her voice steady but urgent. "One wrong move and your husband will have a well-oiled machine of lawyers to defend him. Every step we take must be calculated." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. Every word she uttered only fueled my determination further. As days turned into restless nights and coffee-fueled investigations, my digital archive grew thicker with evidence. I organized countless files on my computer, naming each one meticulously with dates, amounts, and descriptions. I even started recording every conversation, when possible, with my phone, ensuring that nothing would escape the lens of truth. My once solitary apartment had transformed into a covert operations center. Walls once bare were now plastered with printed spreadsheets, sticky notes with coded messages, and flowcharts that connected obscure bank accounts with names that, at first glance, made no sense. One particularly humid evening, as I was sorting through an overwhelming influx of data, my laptop chimed with a new email. The sender was an anonymous source who claimed to have inside information regarding my husband's offshore investments. The email was brief, but detailed enough to pique my interest. It read, "I know where you can find the full details of his secret accounts. Meet me at the old pier at midnight." My heart pounded as I considered the risks. This could be a trap, or it could be the breakthrough I desperately needed. After a brief internal debate, I decided to take the chance. I arranged to meet the source, taking care to disguise my identity and ensure that I was not followed. At midnight, the old pier was shrouded in an eerie silence. The rhythmic lapping of waves against the decaying wooden docks provided an almost hypnotic backdrop. I kept my head down and walked briskly along the deserted pathway, every sense heightened by the possibility of danger. As I approached a dimly lit section of the pier, a hooded figure emerged from the shadows. In a voice barely above a whisper, the stranger said, "I have what you're looking for, but once you take this information, there's no turning back." The air was thick with tension, and I could feel sweat trickling down my back despite the cool night air. With trembling hands, I accepted a small USB drive from the stranger, and without a word, vanished into the darkness. Later, when I plugged the drive into my secure computer, I discovered a treasure trove of documents, detailed records of every offshore account, transfers, and investments that my husband had meticulously concealed. The evidence was damning, and it was the missing piece that would turn my plan from mere suspicion into an irrefutable case. The deeper I delved into the labyrinth of financial deceit, the more I realized that my husband was not only a man of deceit, but also a master of evasion. It became a constant game of cat and mouse, a battle of wits where every move I made had to be carefully calculated to avoid alerting him or his well-connected network. There were days when I felt like I was racing against an unseen clock, knowing that every delay might allow him to cover his tracks further. One particular afternoon, I received a call from Michael. "I've traced another series of transfers," he said, his tone urgent yet controlled. "It appears your husband has been funneling money through a series of shell companies. This is just the tip of the iceberg. We need to move fast before he closes these loopholes." Michael's words spurred me into action. I spent the next several days liaising with him, cross-referencing every piece of data and drafting a comprehensive timeline of his financial maneuvers. It felt as if I were piecing together a complex jigsaw puzzle, a puzzle whose picture, once complete, would expose the full extent of his betrayal. Amid the digital warfare, I also maintained a semblance of normalcy in my daily life. I attended meetings at work, met friends for coffee, and even smiled at acquaintances on the street. Yet, beneath that calm exterior, every cell in my body was charged with the urgency of my mission. I began to receive subtle hints that my husband's network was starting to notice unusual activity. Anonymous emails, strange phone calls at odd hours, and the unnerving feeling of being watched became recurring themes in my day-to-day existence. I recalled Laura's warning about the legal firepower at his disposal, and it only deepened my resolve to remain vigilant. One day, as I was leaving a quiet corner cafe where I had met with Michael, a sleek black car pulled up beside me. The window rolled down, and I caught a glimpse of a man in a dark suit, his eyes scanning me with an intensity that sent shivers down my spine. I quickly altered my route, ducked into a nearby alley, and continued on foot until I felt the danger had passed. That incident confirmed my worst fears. My husband was not just a passive participant in his deceit, he was actively monitoring any threat to his empire. This realization only served to galvanize my determination. I began using more secure communication channels, encrypted emails, and even temporary burner phones to coordinate with Michael, Laura, and the anonymous source who had provided the USB drive. Every day brought new challenges and unexpected twists. I encountered setbacks that threatened to derail my progress. A moment when an important file nearly vanished due to a corrupted hard drive, or when a meeting with a potential legal ally ended abruptly because of a sudden change in their schedule. But each setback was met with renewed vigor. I meticulously backed up every file, maintained constant communication with my allies, and refined my strategies until the process of uncovering the full scope of my husband's deceptions became almost second nature. During one particularly long night, as I sat in the stillness of my apartment, the only sound was the constant tapping of my keyboard and the distant hum of the city below. I found myself speaking aloud, as if to an unseen confidant. Every secret he's buried, every penny he's siphoned off, will all come out in the light, I murmured, my voice a mix of determination and quiet fury. In that solitary moment, surrounded by the tangible evidence of my husband's treachery, I felt a profound sense of clarity. I was not only fighting for justice, I was fighting for my very identity, for the right to reclaim everything that had been stolen from me. As the days turned into weeks, the tension in my life escalated. Every phone call, every whispered conversation in a dimly lit room, carried the weight of impending confrontation. The evidence was mounting, and with each new discovery, I felt both the thrill of impending victory and the crushing pressure of a race against time. Laura arranged a discreet meeting at a quiet hotel lobby where we discussed the next phase of our plan. "We have enough evidence to expose everything," she stated firmly, her eyes unwavering. "But we need to be strategic about how we release it. One wrong move, and your husband's legal team will have you cornered." I listened intently, as she outlined a plan to coordinate with financial regulators and law enforcement agencies, ensuring that the case would be built on a foundation of undeniable proof. The plan was intricate, a multi-step process that involved publicly releasing a portion of the evidence while keeping other parts hidden until we had the full weight of the law on our side. In the midst of all this, I began to sense a subtle change in my own emotions. The raw, blistering anger that had driven me in those early days was evolving into something more complex. There was a strange mixture of sorrow and triumph, a bittersweet acknowledgement that while my world had been shattered, I was also forging a new identity from its ruins. In moments of solitude, I would sometimes catch myself smiling at the irony of it all. The very act of betrayal had given birth to a strength I never knew I possessed. One evening, as I was finalizing a detailed report of every fraudulent transaction, Michael called me. "I've just uncovered something critical," he said, his voice tense. "There's a hidden trail leading to a network of shell companies directly tied to your husband's offshore accounts. If we can trace this fully, it'll be the smoking gun we need." His excitement was palpable, and it spurred me into a frenzy of activity. I gathered every document, every piece of data, and spent hours analyzing patterns and cross-referencing numbers. The clock ticked away, and I hardly noticed as the night wore on, consumed by the task at hand. As dawn crept over the city, casting long shadows across my cluttered desk, I finally pieced together a clear map of his financial labyrinth. The trail was damning, a network of deceit that spanned multiple countries, involving complex layers of transactions that only a mastermind of fraud could orchestrate. I printed out the entire map, spreading it across the table like a battle plan. Each line, each connection was a testament to the magnitude of his betrayal. I knew then that there was no turning back. The trap was set, and soon the full force of the law would come crashing down on him. As the sun dipped below the horizon on a chilly November evening, the pressure in my apartment, now fully transformed into a high-tech operations center, became almost unbearable. Every piece of evidence, every meticulously logged transaction had been reviewed and cross-checked. Michael and I had worked tirelessly to assemble a digital dossier so comprehensive that it could bring my husband's elaborate financial deception crashing down. The plan was simple in theory, but its execution would require precision, nerve, and absolute secrecy. I sat at my desk, eyes fixed on the glowing screen that displayed the digital map of his offshore accounts and shell companies. The map was a tangled web of numbers, dates, and names, but to me, it was a clear blueprint of betrayal. My heart pounded as I reviewed the final details. The sums siphoned away, the suspicious transfers that proved his duplicity, and the hidden connections that linked him to an international network of financial fraud. My phone buzzed with a message from Laura. "We're ready. The legal team is on standby, and we have a meeting scheduled with the financial regulators tomorrow. Be cautious," I responded with a curt, determined message. "I won't fail. The trap is set." That simple exchange marked the moment when everything shifted from planning to action. I gathered my documents, secured all files in encrypted folders, and locked my office door behind me. I knew that tomorrow, every piece of evidence would be scrutinized, and every detail would be our weapon against him. The following morning, under an overcast sky that hinted at impending storms, I met with Laura and Michael in a discreet, reserved conference room at a reputable law firm. The air was thick with anticipation as we laid out the final strategy. Laura began, her tone measured and authoritative. "We have coordinated with financial regulators, and our aim is to launch a full-scale investigation once we publicly release the evidence. The media is already on standby, and a press conference is scheduled for later this week." Michael interjected with a grim smile, tapping on his tablet to display a series of graphs and transaction trails. "These figures are irrefutable. Once we expose this network, there will be no hiding behind offshore accounts or shell companies. Your husband's entire financial structure will be dismantled." I nodded, feeling the gravity of the moment. "This isn't just about me," I said quietly. "It's about sending a message to everyone who thinks they can manipulate and betray without consequences. Every secret, every hidden transfer, it all ends now." Our plan was set in motion. Over the next few days, the investigation was coordinated meticulously. Each meeting with regulators, each conversation with legal experts, was recorded and archived. The plan was simple: publicly unveil the evidence in a carefully orchestrated press conference, and let the combined force of the law, media, and public outrage bring him to his knees. On the day of the press conference, tension hung in the air like a palpable storm cloud. The conference hall was filled with reporters, industry experts, and legal authorities. Flashes of cameras lit up the room. As I took the stage, my heart hammering in my chest, I could feel every eye in the room fixed on me, waiting to hear the truth behind my journey. A journey that had been marked by heartbreak, betrayal, and a relentless pursuit of justice. I began my speech with a steady, clear voice. Thank you all for coming. Today, I stand before you not as a victim, but as someone who has fought back against a system built on deceit. I am here to expose the truth, a truth that has been hidden behind manipulated bank accounts and shell companies. As I spoke, I detailed the timeline of events, the financial maneuvers, and the shocking revelations I had uncovered. Every word was laden with the weight of my personal experience and the meticulous evidence I had gathered. I used vivid language to describe the moment I first received that heart-wrenching text, the nights spent poring over documents, and the relentless determination that drove me to expose the truth. Halfway through the presentation, a murmur spread across the room, a ripple of surprise and disbelief at the damning evidence now laid bare. Just then, the doors at the back of the hall swung open. My husband, his expression a mixture of shock and indignation, stepped into the room. His arrival sent a ripple of gasps through the crowd. I felt my pulse spike as I locked eyes with him. An unspoken challenge passed between us. Without waiting for him to speak, I continued. This isn't just about personal betrayal. It's about accountability. It's about ensuring that no one, regardless of their status, can hide behind a veil of deceit. The room erupted into a flurry of questions from reporters. Amid the chaos, a sharp, condescending voice cut through the clamor from the front row. It was my husband, his tone icy and dismissive. Perhaps if you had accepted some help, instead of stubbornly trying to do everything on your own, none of this would have happened. The words hung in the air, heavy and mocking. I paused, taking a deep breath to steady my emotions. The silence that followed was deafening, and then I responded with unwavering resolve. Help is valuable, but not when it comes with strings attached. I built my empire with my own 2 hands, and every hardship I endured only made me stronger. Today, I stand not as a victim of betrayal, but as a champion of truth. The tension in the room soared to a fever pitch. The press conference had transformed into a public showdown, a moment when personal vendetta collided with the demand for justice. My husband's face reddened with anger, but his eyes betrayed a hint of fear as the evidence against him grew undeniable with every passing second. After my speech, the regulators took the stage to outline the forthcoming legal actions. Every detail of his financial misconduct was laid out in clear, indisputable facts, and the room buzzed with murmurs of approval and astonishment. In that moment, I knew that the trap I had so carefully set was about to close completely around him. In the weeks following the press conference, the fallout was swift and brutal. News outlets blasted headlines that painted a damning portrait of my husband's financial crimes. Social media erupted with support for my story and condemnation of his deceit. Legal proceedings were launched, and investigations into the offshore accounts and shell companies were set into motion. I received countless messages from people across the country, some sharing their own tales of betrayal, others expressing admiration for my courage. The overwhelming response was a testament to the fact that my journey was not isolated. It resonated with anyone who had ever been wronged or underestimated. Amid the chaos, I remained focused on rebuilding, not just my life, but also my sense of self. The trap I had set had been successful in exposing the truth, but it was now time to reclaim the future I had once envisioned. I immersed myself in expanding my newly established empire. Every new venture, every business partnership, and every innovative project was imbued with the lessons I had learned from my personal struggle. Laura and Michael continued to support me through the legal labyrinth, ensuring that every piece of evidence was preserved and every legal angle was exploited to its fullest extent. I became a mentor for those who sought to learn from my experience, sharing not only the technical aspects of the case, but also the emotional resilience required to overcome betrayal. One evening, as I walked through the quiet corridors of my newly renovated office, a space that symbolized both my struggles and my triumph, I paused to reflect on how far I had come. I remembered the cold, lonely nights spent plotting my revenge, and I felt a deep sense of gratitude for every hardship that had molded me into the person I was today. I had transformed personal tragedy into a catalyst for change, not just for myself, but for everyone who believed in the power of truth and perseverance. During a final roundtable discussion with aspiring entrepreneurs, I shared the wisdom that had carried me through my darkest hours. Every setback is a stepping stone. The scars you bear are the badges of honor that prove you have fought for your dreams. Let your failures be the foundation of your future successes, and never allow anyone else to define your worth. The session ended with a standing ovation, a moment that encapsulated the collective hope and determination of everyone in the room. It was a powerful reminder that the true measure of success is not found in the absence of failure, but in the relentless pursuit of one's own destiny, despite the odds. The day after the press conference, the atmosphere was charged with a sense of finality and rebirth. The investigation had set legal wheels in motion that promised to dismantle every hidden layer of deceit my husband had built. In the days that followed, the media frenzy continued unabated. But amidst the chaos, I found solace in knowing that justice was finally taking shape. I sat in a spacious conference room at the law firm, surrounded by Laura, Michael, and a cadre of legal experts. A large digital screen displayed the latest updates from the regulators and a timeline of the impending legal actions. The room was silent except for the gentle hum of computers and the occasional rustle of papers. In that quiet, every detail resonated with the gravity of the moment. Laura leaned forward, her eyes serious. Everything is falling into place. We have enough evidence to freeze his assets, and the regulators are prepared to move. It's time to let the full force of the law speak. Michael nodded in agreement, his fingers tapping rhythmically on the desk as he reviewed his notes. I took a deep breath and recalled the countless hours I had spent piecing together every transaction, every hidden transfer. This isn't just about exposing his crimes, I said, my voice firm yet tinged with an undercurrent of relief. It's about reclaiming my life. Every detail of his deceit will serve as a reminder that I was once broken, but today I stand rebuilt. My words, simple but resolute, hung in the air like a promise to myself and to everyone who had suffered at the hands of betrayal. That evening, I returned to my newly renovated office, a space that had evolved from the cramped war room of my past into a symbol of my rebirth. The walls, now adorned with inspirational quotes and framed newspaper clippings chronicling my journey, reminded me of the battles fought and the victories won. I walked slowly along the corridor, each step a testament to how far I had come from that fateful night when a single text had shattered my world. Later that night, as I sat at my desk reviewing the final legal documents, I reflected on the personal transformation that had accompanied this public battle. The sting of betrayal had once threatened to engulf me, but in its place, I had found an unyielding strength, a strength that allowed me not only to seek revenge but to build a future where I was in complete control of my destiny. Every scar was now a symbol of survival. Every sleepless night, a stepping stone towards the empire I was constructing. The subsequent months marked the beginning of a new era, a time when my personal victory transformed into a broader mission. With the legal proceedings underway and my husband's financial web unraveling, I turned my focus towards creating a lasting legacy. I envisioned an organization that would empower others who had suffered similar betrayals, turning their pain into a pathway for success. I launched the Empowerment Foundation, a charitable initiative dedicated to providing scholarships, mentorship, and startup capital to aspiring entrepreneurs from underprivileged backgrounds. The foundation's mission was clear: to ensure that no one would ever have to rely solely on a family safety net or be crushed under the weight of betrayal. Every dollar, every resource allocated was a beacon of hope for those determined to rewrite their stories. At the inaugural event of the foundation, an elegant evening held in a renovated historic theater, I took the stage to address a crowd filled with hopeful faces, survivors of their own struggles, and future visionaries. The hall was bathed in soft, warm light, and every seat was occupied by individuals eager to listen, learn, and find inspiration. I began my speech with a quiet, reflective tone. There was a time when I believed that betrayal was the end of the road, when the person I loved chose a path that left me in ruins. I felt lost. But in that darkest hour, I discovered that true strength lies not in avoiding hardship, but in using it as the fuel to ignite your inner fire. Today, we celebrate not just a victory over deceit, but the dawn of a new era, a time when every setback becomes a stepping stone toward greatness. As I recounted the trials and tribulations of my journey, from the moment I received that devastating text to the painstaking days of gathering evidence and building alliances, the audience listened in rapt attention. I shared intimate details of the sleepless nights, the cold calculations, and even the moments of unexpected humor that had punctuated my relentless quest for justice. My voice resonated with emotion as I spoke of the inner transformation that had turned my sorrow into a catalyst for empowerment. One of the most moving moments came when a young entrepreneur from the audience stood up and, with tears in her eyes, said, "Your story is my inspiration. I've faced rejection and hardship, but hearing you speak gives me the strength to keep fighting for my dreams." Her words, echoed by the resounding applause of the crowd, affirmed that my personal battle had transcended into a collective victory, one that would light the way for countless others. The foundation was more than a charitable organization. It was a living embodiment of the philosophy that had carried me through my darkest days. Every mentorship session, every workshop organized, was a tribute to the resilience of the human spirit, a testament to the fact that even the deepest wounds could heal and blossom into something extraordinary. Years passed, and the wounds of the past gradually transformed into memories that served as powerful lessons. I often found myself wandering through the halls of my now expansive headquarters, a building that not only housed my thriving business empire, but also the offices of the Empowerment Foundation. Each room, each corridor, was a reminder of the journey that had started with a single, devastating text and culminated in a life reimagined. In quiet moments of reflection, I would sit in my private study, surrounded by mementos of a bygone era. The old, yellowed notebooks filled with desperate scribbles, a framed printout of that fateful text message, and photographs capturing the myriad moments of triumph and defeat. These relics were not symbols of pain, but of the evolution that had transformed me into the person I had become, a woman of strength, integrity, and unwavering resolve. I continued to share my story through public speeches, interviews, and a series of published memoirs that became bestsellers. Each retelling was more than a recitation of past events. It was an invitation for others to see that adversity, when met with courage and determination, could be the very foundation upon which greatness is built. In one final, poignant moment during a live-streamed Q&A session, a viewer asked, "What was the most important lesson you learned from your journey?" I paused, then replied softly, "That every betrayal, every setback is not the end but a chance to rebuild, to transform pain into power. The scars you bear are not marks of defeat, but symbols of your capacity to rise again, stronger and wiser than before." Those words, captured and echoed across thousands of screens, resonated deeply with a generation hungry for hope and reinvention. They reminded everyone that while life may knock you down, the will to rise is what truly defines you. As the sun set on that day, casting long golden rays over the city, I stepped out onto the balcony of my headquarters. The view was breathtaking, a sprawling vista of lights, life, and endless possibility. In that serene moment, I felt an overwhelming gratitude for the journey that had led me here. I knew that the future held endless challenges and opportunities, but I also knew that I was ready to face them head-on, with the same relentless spirit that had carried me through the darkest of nights. And so, my story continues, not as a closed chapter, but as an ongoing saga of resilience, empowerment, and the unwavering belief that the power to transform lies within each of us. The empire I built is not merely a monument to my success. It is a legacy that will inspire generations to come, a testament to the fact that even in the face of utter betrayal, one can rise, rebuild, and reclaim one's destiny.